Welcome to the Blueprint Strategy Podcast, your premier destination for insights and innovations in healthcare and nonprofit leadership. I'm your host, Todd Schmiedeler, and together we'll explore the strategies and stories that are transforming these vital sectors. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and invited to the conversation. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to our podcast. Thanks for being here. I'm so excited today. I am going to go into a subject that many of you all probably haven't dealt with before, but it is a healthcare trade association, and we're going to talk to an expert in it. I'm so happy to have my friend Jason Squires here. He serves as the CEO of LeadingAge Kentucky, and Jason's been the CEO now for how long, Jason?
Going on about 4 months.
4 months. Welcome to the role. I'm sure it's been enlightening and engaging. Before we get started on kind of LeadingAge Kentucky and the role that trade associations play, tell us a little bit about what brought you to LeadingAge Kentucky and your background, Jason.
Well, I began my career in traditional long-term care back in the late 90s and then moved over into the developmental disabilities field and worked for a local intellectual and developmental disability nonprofit for about 25 years, and we were a member of LeadingAge.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
been involved with LeadingAge off and on for nearly 30 years, and then when this opportunity became available, decided to take a look at it.
Well, that's great. That leads me to the question a little bit, if you can give us some information about LeadingAge Kentucky, because just the fact that you're talking about it in terms of not just kind of the senior living space, but, intellectual disabilities, that's an interesting thing. Tell us a little bit about LeadingAge and kind of where it kind of focuses its energy and its advocacy.
Well, LeadingAge Kentucky is part of a national group. So there's LeadingAge National, and we're primarily focused on the nonprofit long-term care sector.
Okay.
So that's your traditional nonprofits with senior living, nursing homes, assisted living, things of that nature. But then also the intellectual and developmental disability side, where there's also long-term care services being provided there. And so LeadingAge kind of, again, it's mostly nonprofit, long-term care for people with and without disability, both, but mostly in the traditional senior living space.
And you're covering the entire state. About how many members do you have? Those sort of numbers for us?
We've got about 70 members.
Okay,
and we're as far west as Paducah. We're as far east as Ashland, northern Kentucky, and then down Bowling Green, Scottsville, that area. So we are all over the state.
And what would be some of the major services that a LeadingAge Kentucky would offer its members, and why they would be a member in your organization?
Well, several things. So advocacy, when it comes to state and federal legislative issues, regulatory issues, advocacy, that's number one. Education, we have an annual conference every year, as well as education going on throughout the year. Anytime there's an issue going on in Frankfurt, a regulatory issue or something that our members need help with from state officials, elected officials, also just networking, being part of something, being part of a group. We've got CEOs that share among each other. We've got directors of HR that share among each other, and just that collaborative feel, knowing that you're not alone.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on right now in the field.
Yeah.
To not be alone right now is a good thing for our members. Yeah,
I mean, tell us a couple of things that are kind of hitting your members and that are kind of the top priorities for what they're facing. And, I always talk about it in terms of, what's keeping you up at night. And, I'm sure that you talk to the CEOs across the state and other members. What are those things that are keeping them up at night?
Right. There's probably 3 or 4 things. And while none of it's a surprise, it plays out differently in our field. So the workforce is a major issue, and we're not alone there. But when you think about the primary demographic in our field, generally speaking, it's women between the ages of 25 and 45. That demographic is shrinking while seniors are living longer.
Right.
So those two lines are going the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So the workforce is a big one. Medicaid, it hasn't hit yet. It's coming, with the Budget Reconciliation Act that was passed and signed on the 4th of July. that's going to have a major impact in our field.
Okay.
Some of that, we know what's going to happen at the federal level. At the state level, we don't know yet how that's going to trickle down. And we'll know more, hopefully, in 2026 as our legislature gets into the session and starts dealing with those things. But Medicaid is going to be a major issue for us. And then number 3 is probably technology.
Oh, okay.
When we talk about AI, that wave is coming as well in long-term care. And so I think there are actually some benefit to that. A lot of people are very skeptical. A lot of people are afraid of what AI could do. And I think maybe that's justified, but I think there's also a lot of benefit that can help our field as well.
Yeah, on the AI topic, and for that matter, the Medicaid kind of situation, I've got to believe that there's some opportunity to demystify those things, with your leadership, because sometimes a lot of rumors and fear get spread really quickly in most industries, but I know it does in healthcare a lot, right. Where people read something and then they're sharing it, but they don't necessarily have a depth of it or really know how to utilize it yet. I would think that LeadingAge Kentucky serves as a conduit by which you can actually not only understand things a little bit deeper and get the truth of it from the sources that have credibility, but also, my guess is based off of what you said, there's a lot of best practices shared. Are you seeing that, let's take one of those issues, let's take Medicaid, because it sounds like that's going to be a hot issue. It's been one, but I'm sure it's going to be one in the future. Your members are kind of a diverse group. Are all of them going to encounter Medicaid challenges, or is it just most of them? Where does that kind of break within your membership?
The majority will feel the impact one way or another.
Okay.
So when it comes to the skilled nursing, the intellectual and developmental disability side, they're going to feel it because they rely to one extent or another on Medicaid reimbursement.
Okay.
Some of the other areas, not so much, but primarily when you think about your traditional nursing home and your traditional intellectual disability services, they're going to feel it in different ways, different degrees, but that's where the impact is going to be felt. In terms of helping our members sift through all the stuff that they're hearing, and a lot of our leaders they're so wrapped up in the day-to-day of making sure that people are coming to work, making sure that their census is up, and making sure that all their things are going on.
Quality of care, all of the things that are critical every day.
They're so wrapped up in those things that sometimes there can be some, I want to say maybe some irrational fear about what might be coming. And so part of our responsibility at LeadingAge Kentucky and LeadingAge National is to help temper some of that anxiety. Not to say that we want to be Pollyanna about it, not to say that there's nothing wrong, but to take a measured approach.
Right.
So, for example, with the Medicaid thing, when the bill was signed, I had members calling saying, do I need to cut my budget in half, or do I need to start?
Wow.
And it's like, we're not there yet.
Yeah.
Let's take a slow and methodical pace. Yeah. I'm not telling you you're never going to have to deal with the budgetary problem,
right? But
now's not the time.
So what are some of the ways that you get that information out? I mean, you mentioned that you do a conference, and, you mentioned that you're communicating with the state and with other kind of sources, and you're part of a national organization. What are kind of some of the key ways that you get that communication out to your members, and how do you engage them in making sure that they're where they need to be so that they can make good business decisions?
Well, one of the advantages to being a LeadingAge member is LeadingAge National and their policy team are very strong at the federal level.
Okay.
So we get a lot of our information from the national headquarters. That helps us to understand what's going on at the federal level. At the state level, we're blessed, that we've got relationship with the people in Frankfort.
Yeah.
In fact, this morning, I was on the phone with somebody at Medicaid, talking about what could the impact be. And so we've got those contacts at the national level and at the state level. And then, so as far as how we get that out, I've got a weekly newsletter that goes out every Friday with whatever the highlights are for the week. If there's something that pops in the meantime, then we can send out an advocacy alert just letting people know what's going on so they don't have to wait. So if something pops on a Tuesday that needs action, we don't wait until Friday.
Till Friday to your normal email newsletter. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
And our members are very involved. When I send out an advocacy alert, call your senator, call your congressperson, email them, they do that. They respond. And it's about the numbers. It's about making sure that we're heard. We're a pretty large group when it comes to the senior living space. If you think about all the seniors that in your own life. And so we're a large group, and we are heard. And so we can count on our members for that.
Well, it's this has actually impacted me this weekend. As a matter of fact, one of my uncles actually got a wound on his foot, and he's older, and he got a wound on his foot. So we had to take him to the emergency room. And then they said, well, we need to do some grafting onto his foot because of the wound. And, he actually called me today and said, hey, I'm going to need to go to rehab. Can you suggest a couple places that I could go to rehab? And sometimes we forget, because we may not deal with it every day, how important it is to take care of our loved ones in that moment and have good resources in our communities, so that all of a sudden, he may only be there for a few days or weeks. I'm not sure, because I'm not an expert on wounds. But I do know that, my aunt and my mom and my other aunt, we're all concerned about making sure that we got them into the right place.
Right.
And I think it's critical for us to make sure that we don't overlook those places where we may not need it today, but all of us are probably going to need it to a certain degree tomorrow. And your advocacy is important. I wonder about, if you've got 70 members, do you have a rough idea of a range of the number of even employees that are in those groups? I mean, would you say that there's an average of 50, 100, 150, in most of your members? Any idea about those numbers?
Well, it's really all over the board. We have, so in some of the rural parts of the state, we've got these small standalone nursing homes that have been there forever. They might have 50 or 60 beds.
Okay.
And so they might have just a few dozen employees.
Okay.
Then we've got some of the larger communities where you've got several hundred. So it really is kind of all over the board.
Okay.
I want to go back to something you were talking about when it comes to a family member who all of a sudden needs long-term care.
Yeah.
Even though we all have parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles, and we're all seeing them age, we don't think about it until we need it.
Right.
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 And so then, how do you know where to go?
Right.
How do you know where the good nursing homes are, or the ones that you might stay away from? And so having those resources, obviously, we're available. But then there's also the ability to get online, and you can go to the Medicare website and you can search for facilities in your areas. It gives you their rankings, how they've done on their licensure surveys and things like that. So there's resources out there, but we just don't think about it until we need it.
Yeah, absolutely. Shift gears for just a second. You're talking about, everything going on with Medicaid and the potential, I got to believe that whenever those things change, it's typically a tightening of the budget. You and I talk frequently about, kind of alternative funding, for, organizations, so that we continue to elevate the quality of care and the quality of life of the seniors that are there. Where do you see kind of the future for those opportunities? And, are your members thinking about, hey, how do we think about how we could continue to elevate what we're doing, even though we know that certain funding sources may be a little bit more of a struggle?
Right. One of the things that, and again, being new in the role, part of what I'm learning about is how to best support our members. So one area is looking for ways to get money back in their pockets.
Yeah.
That can be done through combining with other facilities to leverage buying power.
Oh, yeah, good idea.
When it comes to medical supplies, food, office supplies, things of that nature. We can leverage our buying power, and that's something that we're starting to develop within the association. Looking for ways for LeadingAge Kentucky to bolster its revenue, so that, and this is the long-term goal, but being able to reduce our dues with our members.
Yeah, because that's a cost that they're facing right now.
So if we're generating revenue, then we can offset some of the cost of dues from our members.
Right.
Again, that's a long-term goal. But definitely, I think it's the direction we need to head.
Yeah, I mean, so have you gotten to a point where you're brainstorming some of those ideas to generate some additional revenue that might cut their fees down?
We're getting there.
Yeah. Well, I know you're only 4 months in.
Right.
And so,
well, there's the concept where you can, if you're utilizing a certain company's services and you're introducing them to your members, the members are utilizing the services. There's some revenue sharing that can go on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether it's for marketing dollars, education dollars, things like that. That's an opportunity for us to partner with a vendor, say, insurance or capital investment and things like that to draw in potential revenue for LeadingAge Kentucky. And again, that impact our members, because if we can get those dues down, that's something that they don't have to worry about.
Yeah, and introducing them to vetted services, I got to believe is a member benefit that is actually probably really appreciated, because they are so busy with the day-to-day of taking care of so many people within their buildings and facilities that, sometimes I got to believe it's difficult for them to always be able to vet, multiple providers within whatever it is that they might need, but they need it.
Exactly. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I had an administrator of a facility in the western part of the state, and they needed to buy some new beds, some new hospital beds.
Oh, okay.
And so she called and said, "Can you suggest a vendor, a medical supply company, to buy beds for?" So I gave her a couple, that she could call them both and look at the numbers. And so they, we've got members that utilize us just for that.
Yeah.
You call them and say, "Can you give me a vendor that you trust?" And so fortunately, we've got that experience with all of our members. We know the vendors that can deliver. We know that the vendors that overpromise and don't do what they say they're going to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, vetting that I think is critical. When you think about workforce, and you highlighted that the intersection between, the traditional workforce, which is female, somewhere between, I think you said 25 and 45 years of age, and how that's a declining population generically across our country. And yet the increased number of seniors that are going to need services because people are living longer. I remember back like 20 years ago, there was the phrase was a silver tsunami, coming from the baby boomers. And I know we're right in the middle of that. When you think about that, and you also mentioned technology, is there any overlap of, workforce and technology that you could see that might present opportunities that will help overcome that kind of really negative outlook with regards to workforce?
Well, there can be some things with technology that, well, in when you're providing services to people, you can't replace that personal touch.
Right. Absolutely.
We all know that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to certain environments where we have people who are prone to wandering,
yes,
people who try to get out of the building, there are some creative ways where technology is being used to help alert staff to somebody. You can't necessarily lock down all the doors.
Right.
But if there can be some sort of a monitoring system where, for example, if someone is prone to falling, then there's some AI software out there where it can identify that person getting up and walking around, and we know that person is at risk for falling, and then the staff can get a notification. It's things like that, so that the staff don't necessarily have to have constant eyes on.
Right.
Because, they've got plenty of other things they need to be doing, and we don't physically have enough staff to be one-on-one.
Yeah.
But some of those ways that technology can help, again, not replacing the workforce, but supplementing it and reducing the risk of the people that they're supporting.
Gotcha. And as I think I had the good fortune to spend 10 years in long-term care. And, one of the amazing things that I would have never realized without being in it was the importance of the different layers of the staff and their teamwork together. I always cite, how important the housekeeping staff was that I didn't really know about when I went into the business, and how a lot of times the nurses and the CNAs are have this need to move if there's some sort of a medical need, and so they might be having a great discussion and talking to one of the residents, but at the same time, if there was somebody down the hall that needed an emergency kind of intervention, that they needed to take care of that. But with housekeeping, one of the things that I found was is that they were really able to have deep, rich conversations with residents and people, because they were, yes, responsible for doing certain things, but it was, they weren't going to automatically, they weren't going to have frankly a sweeper crisis, or emergency, that would come up. And the depth by that which that relationship with that housekeeper or food services individual, it gave me an understanding that that the job of senior living, and I assume that same thing for intellectually disabled providers, it's not just important that those residents feel cared for, but it's really important that they feel cared about.
Right.
Right. And in your mind, are there trainings? Because you have this national conference. What kind of trainings do you all do with the staff and the leadership to be able to really create that environment that allows them to be even more successful when they go back?
Well, a lot of it has to do with just like what you said, forming those bonds with the people they're working with. We also talk about caring for the caregiver.
Okay.
And not losing sight of whether it's housekeeping, whether it's dietary, whether it's your CNA, the things that they're dealing with on a daily basis at work or at home, and making sure that they're feeling supported so that they can be present when they're at work.
Yeah.
And so whether it's the national conference, and we've got our state conference coming up this fall, focusing some of our education on the caregivers, making sure that we're meeting their needs so that they can be present for the resident.
So, for you as a leader in this, you've obviously been in the industry for decades, but you've been in the role for 4 months. Are there 2 or 3 things that right now you've been focused on, with regards to making sure that you're meeting the needs and identifying those needs, or even you've identified this need and you want to grow in this way so that you might be able to also add more value as the leader of the organization?
Well, something I heard the other day, it reminded me the old story. If you're a hockey fan, Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah.
And Wayne Gretzky talks about what made him such a great hockey player.
Yeah.
And it's not because he was where the puck was.
Right.
He skated to where the puck was going to be.
Yeah.
And
Love
so
that.
when I think about what LeadingAge Kentucky needs to be, we need to be where the puck is going to be, and we need to help our members get there.
Okay.
So whether that's advocacy and legislative issues, whether that's getting ahead of the curve on revenue sharing so that they can drop their dues, whether that's helping them be a voice in Frankfurt, whether that's giving them that sense of connectivity among their peers, all those things, but meeting them where they need to be and not being reactive.
Yeah.
Being more proactive.
Yeah.
And so those are the things that I'm focused on. I think the association has a bright future. We've got a lot of things that are in the works. Again, one of the things of being new on the job is I can come in and ask all the questions.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's right.
I don't
That's
know.
right.
So
That's right.
working through some of those things, but ultimately helping our members so that they can focus on their residents and not worry about funding and not worrying about reimbursement, not worrying about the staffing challenges. We can't do everything.
Right.
We can't be all things for all people. We recognize that. But again, helping our members so that they can focus on why they got into the business to begin with.
Right.
Which is caring for people.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, you and I have had a couple of discussions about the impact of technology, and in particular here recently, about AI. And I do think that there is a lot of questions that go on about AI. And one of the key things that I believe that can help demystify that is by making it more real and relevant to specific roles. and in your role, have you seen or identified one or two things in AI that you have said, hey, I think this could help me be more effective and efficient with my time, that I might be able to actually give more value to our members?
That's a great question. Like you said, we have had a couple conversations. You're much better versed in AI than I am. I'm getting there.
Yeah.
When I think about that, it's easy to get down into the weeds. So, for example, this fall we'll be getting into strategic planning.
Yeah.
And when I think about what does the ultimate strategic plan look like for LeadingAge Kentucky, I think there's a role that AI can play there.
Yeah.
Not putting together the entire plan, not anything like that, but supporting and kind of bolstering the work that we're doing, because I think one of the advantages of AI is it's got that such a broad network to draw from, where there may be some resources out there that we're not aware of that can supplement our strategic plan. And so that's one example where using that tool as someone who doesn't know everything. And again, AI can't replace what we're doing as humans.
Yeah, that's right.
But I do think it can supplement that.
Yeah.
And so I think when I think about the future of where we're going to go, I think that can help.
Yeah, often, the way I've always heard it over the last year or so, because, I'm a fan of Jeff Woods, who wrote The AI-Driven Leader. He talks about it being your thought partner.
Right.
You still have to be your thought leader. And even to the point of the strategic plan, it can't make your strategic plan for you without context and information that is critical that you and your members add value in, but it can help organize and maybe bring some thoughts around that will help make sure that you have a comprehensive plan that is actually dealing with any of the solutions that might be out there that you might not know at the forefront.
Right.
Exactly. So I want to be respectful of your time, and but I want to finish by saying, you've shared a lot about your role and about LeadingAge, and appreciate that immensely. But I'd love to know a little bit more about you, just when you're not doing the LeadingAge and leading a statewide organization, what is it that you like to do, with your free time?
Well, my wife and I have 3 young men that are children, and they're not boys, but they're young men.
Yeah.
But we like to spend a lot of time together. I'm big in the outdoors, so everything from hiking, fishing, that sort of thing. I love being outside, and I like to read. That's something I do a lot as well. So, and I'm a UK grad, so go Big Blue.
Yeah.
Anything that had the ball related to UK, I'm on it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Well, I will say that this year, I'm pretty excited about the basketball in our state.
Yeah.
And that U of L UK game, I think will be one of the highlights of the year.
I hope so.
And I know that there's so much, if you're not from Kentucky, you don't understand the kind of the competition between the two. But I think every state's got those little rivalries. For us, it's about basketball, I think, more than anything else. Right. But for the most part, I find that it's a good discussion point to break down that ultimately, though we might be competitive in basketball, as across our state or across an industry, we really need to be collaborating, because in the end, we're all trying to do one thing, and that is serve people. And if we're competing about that, we usually probably aren't as good as we should be at doing that. So, I want to thank you for your time, Jason.
You're welcome.
It's been great. I think that, Jason's a great resource if, you have some questions, or, hey, maybe you're an organization that wants to join LeadingAge Kentucky. I'm going to put the contact info in the show notes, and I want to think about, how the audience is, spending your time, and the fact that you would give us a few minutes of your time to learn more about not just LeadingAge, but some of the leadership that Jason brings, and just want to say thank you, as always, and then come back in 2 weeks and we'll have our next episode. But for that, thank you so much for coming, and I appreciate your time. Hey, thanks for joining us on the Blueprint Strategy Podcast. We hope today's conversation sparked new ideas and inspired you to take action in your own organization. To stay connected and never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe and follow us on our socials. And remember, you can find more resources and information at www.thumbprint.consulting. Again, that's www.thumbprint.consulting. Until next time, keep finding ways to innovate and to leave your mark.